What happens when a movie is so outrageous that even the home video distributors panic? In the fever dream decade of the 1970s, studios unleashed a wave of exploitation films so raw and anarchic that VHS companies later had to slice them apart just to get them into living rooms. These are the 12 70s exploitation movies so wild they were recut for home video. Number 12, Switchblade Sisters, 1975. It was loud, gritty, and gloriously unapologetic. Switchblade Sisters, known to midnight audiences as the ultimate girl gang rebellion story, told of teenage outlaws carving their own rules in a violent cityscape. Directed by Jack Hill, the film followed Lace and her gang, the Dagger Debs, as they rose from backstreet chaos to revolutionary warfare. What began as grindhouse pulp exploded into a neon-soaked feminist riot before the word existed. Yet, when it hit home, video distributors flinched. The dialogue was too raw, the fights too relentless, and the tone too unpredictable. Scenes of prison brutality and street warfare were shortened or rearranged to make the women seem less threatening. Even the soundtrack was altered, muting its pounding intensity. Critics called the VHS cut tame, while collectors whispered about bootleg reels of the original. Decades later, Quentin Tarantino revived it through his Rolling Thunder label, restoring the full chaos for modern audiences. Switchblade Sisters went from forgotten gang flick to cult manifesto, and remains a blazing symbol of 70s rebellion, proof that no edit could dull its blade. Number 11, Fight for Your Life, 1977. When audiences first saw this film, many left in stunned silence. Fight for Your Life was marketed as a revenge thriller, but played more like a raw nerve exposed on screen. It told the story of a preacher and his family terrorized by escaped convicts, only to turn the tables in a brutal showdown. Shot cheaply in upstate New York, it radiated anger and discomfort from its first frame. Theatrical versions drew protests across the United States. By the time it reached VHS shelves, the movie was recut several times. Distributors trimmed whole sections of dialogue and violence, hoping to soften the racial tension at its core, but each cut only made the atmosphere stranger, an echo of fury without context. The director William Lustig refused to endorse any of the edits, calling them moral cowardice. Collectors later unearthed uncut prints from grindhouse vaults, showing what audiences originally saw, an unfiltered reflection of 70s rage. Today, Fight for Your Life stands as one of exploitation cinema's most controversial milestones, a mirror to a fractured nation and a reminder that sanitizing history never makes it less painful. Number 10, The Big Dollhouse, 1971. In the early 70s, Roger Corman discovered a formula that both thrilled and terrified censors. The Big Dollhouse was his explosive entry into the women in prison genre, a claustrophobic saga of defiance filmed in the jungles of the Philippines. It starred a young Pam Grier, whose ferocity and charisma burned through every frame. The film's mix of grit, rhythm, and rebellion made it an international sensation, but home video distributors decades later did not know what to do with it. The original print ran too raw, too feverish for family-friendly VHS shelves. Scenes of riot and revolt were rearranged, entire sequences of chaos were shortened, and the editing rhythm flattened to feel more conventional. Even the climactic escape was softened to appear less chaotic. Yet the legend survived. Restorations in the 90s revealed how radical the uncut version truly was, an allegory of power and resistance disguised as pulp entertainment. Modern critics hail The Big Dollhouse as the spark that ignited Grier's rise and redefined the idea of cinematic rebellion. Its spirit could not be caged, not even by the cold scissors of home video editors. Number 9, Last House on the Left, 1972. Few films shattered boundaries like Last House on the Left. It arrived during an age of war headlines and moral panic, and it dared to confront both through unrelenting terror. Directed by a young Wes Craven, it told the story of two teenage girls whose day trip spiraled into horror at the hands of escaped criminals and the violent revenge that followed. It was not just a movie, it was a gut punch to the cultural conscience of the 1970s. Audiences fainted or fled during early screenings. Critics called it depraved, while others saw it as the birth of a new kind of realism. The poster's infamous warning urged viewers to repeat the phrase, "It's only a movie," like a mantra to survive the experience. When home video distributors inherited it, they recoiled. VHS edits sliced away entire minutes of violence, replacing the film's unflinching moral confrontation with jump cuts and odd silences. Yet, even in its censored form, the movie's dread lingered. It became an underground rite of passage whispered about by teenagers who tracked down uncut imports from Europe. Today restored and analyzed in film schools, Last House on the Left is remembered not as a simple exploitation flick, but as the raw birth cry of modern horror, where violence mirrored the chaos of its own era. Number 8, Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, 1975. No title from the decade carried as much infamy as this one. Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS was part of a wave of shock cinema designed to push every boundary possible. brutal. Shot quickly in Canada using leftover sets from the television show Hogan's Heroes, it told of a sadistic commandant whose experiments and cruelty symbolized the corruption of absolute power. It was marketed as forbidden history, but it became something more, a symbol of cinema's obsession with transgression. Even in grindhouse theaters, many countries banned it outright. When it came to home, video distributors tried to disguise its origins recutting scenes to make it appear like generic war adventure rather than the grotesque allegory it was. The VHS edits removed whole sequences, yet the film's reputation grew with every cut. Collectors searched for the mythical uncut print smuggled through Europe while censors continued to condemn it. Director Don Edmonds later admitted the film was both exploitation and protest, a twisted reflection of cruelty disguised as entertainment. In its restored state, it stands as an uncomfortable artifact, a warning about how the appetite for shock can mirror the very brutality it condemns. Ilsa became a legend of the forbidden forever, etched in cinema's Hall of Nightmares. Number 7. Caged Heat, 1974. Before director Jonathan Demme became a Hollywood powerhouse, he made this feverish, low-budget prison drama under the wing of Roger Corman. Caged Heat was supposed to be routine drive-in fare, but Demme infused it with satire, psychedelic dream sequences, and unexpected sympathy for its imprisoned women. It was wild, weird, and far smarter than audiences expected. Upon its release, the film drew packed midnight crowds and polarized critics. Some saw it as pure grindhouse chaos, while others recognized the filmmaker's surreal touch. When the VHS boom arrived, the film's blend of humor and fury baffled distributors. They trimmed the surreal sequences, replaced its jazz-funk score, and even altered its pacing to mimic more conventional prison thrillers. The result was a hollow imitation, stripped of its rhythm and irony. Years later, Demme's reputation soared after directing Silence of the Lambs, and cinephiles began hunting for his lost debut. Restorations revealed how Caged Heat was a bold feminist subversion disguised as pulp rebellion. It remains a testament to creative audacity and a reminder that even the roughest beginnings can hide brilliance waiting to be rediscovered. Number 6. The Street Fighter, 1974. The Street Fighter was not just another martial arts movie, it was a shockwave that turned the genre upside down. Starring the unstoppable Sonny Chiba, it unleashed a ferocity that stunned even seasoned action fans. The film followed Takuma Tsurugi, a mercenary fighter who sells his brutal skills to the highest bidder until he crosses a powerful crime syndicate. What followed was an eruption of violence so intense that critics called it savage poetry. When it hit American theaters, distributors were unprepared. The film's bone-breaking realism earned it the first-ever X rating in the United States for violence alone. No other action film had been branded that way before. Censors demanded cuts, but grindhouse theaters refused trimming only seconds to sneak it past local boards. Still, it spread through whispered word of mouth as audiences dared each other to survive the whole screening. When the Street Fighter finally reached home video years later, distributors panicked again. The VHS versions were hacked to pieces, removing entire fight sequences and muting its most infamous jaw-shattering moments. Some releases even rearranged scenes to hide continuity gaps left by censorship, but nothing could erase Sonny Chiba's raw magnetism. Today restored in all its gritty fury, the Street Fighter stands as the bridge between kung fu cinema and modern action realism. It inspired generations from Quentin Tarantino to the creators of Mortal Kombat. It was dangerous, honest, and relentless. Every cut it suffered only made its legend stronger. Number 5. I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. Even in the anarchic world of 70s exploitation, few films ignited such outrage. I Spit on Your Grave, directed by Mir Zarchi, was conceived as a grim fable of vengeance told without glamour or relief. It followed a writer whose retreat to the countryside turned into a nightmare of cruelty and retribution. Shot with handheld intensity and stripped of any music, it felt almost documentary in its brutality. Audiences were not ready. Some critics called it barbaric. Others claimed it was misunderstood art. Drive-ins banned it. Major theaters refused to touch it. Yet, when it reached home video in the 80s, the moral panic began anew. Distributors recut the movie into multiple regional versions, each claiming to be the definitive one. Some prints softened the violence, while others rearranged the story to disguise its raw realism. The strange irony is that every censored version only amplified its myth. It became the forbidden tape parents warned teenagers about the movie video stores hid behind counters. For decades, it circulated in whispered legend until a full restoration revealed what Zarchi originally intended, an unflinching study of trauma, power, and revenge. Today, I Spit on Your Grave is recognized as one of the most polarizing exploitation films ever made, both condemned and defended for the same reason. It forced viewers to confront violence without distance. In that honesty lies its horror and its strange, twisted power. Number 4. Coffy, 1973. Before she became a legend, Pam Grier was the unstoppable force of Coffy. Directed by Jack Hill, this movie detonated like a revolution in real form. It It told the story of a nurse turned vigilante avenging her sister's destruction at the hands of a corrupt drug empire. What made it unforgettable was Greer herself, a whirlwind of charisma, toughness, and righteous fury. Coffy was a hit at drive-ins, but too raw for mainstream audiences. Its blend of street realism humor and political rage made studios nervous. When it came to VHS decades later, distributors carved away scenes of corruption and grit, replacing Hill's jagged editing rhythm with smoother pacing. Even its vibrant funk soundtrack was softened to tone down its rebellious energy. But the fans noticed. The altered versions stripped away the very spirit that made the film revolutionary. Pam, Greer's performance remained magnetic, yet the message of power and resistance felt muted. Bootleg tapes began circulating, promising the uncut experience. Eventually, the full restoration returned to screens, reminding audiences how ahead of its time Coffy truly was. Beneath its pulp shell lay a cry for justice, a voice for empowerment, and a reminder that cinema can be both defiant and human. Greer's Coffy didn't just fight corruption. She redefined what a hero could look like. Number 3. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Few films have ever crawled into the collective subconscious quite like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Directed by Tobe Hooper on a shoestring budget in the oppressive Texas heat, it was a cinematic hallucination. Raw, grainy, and disturbingly real. The story followed a group of young travelers who stumble upon a family of cannibalistic outcasts, led by the now iconic Leatherface. What made it unforgettable was not the gore, but the relentless psychological dread, the feeling that every second was one step closer to madness. When it first played in theaters in 1974, people fainted, vomited, or fled. Critics were divided. Some called it the death of decency, others hailed it as a nightmare masterpiece. Hooper's use of handheld cameras, buzzing chainsaws, and stark natural lighting gave it an authenticity that looked like found footage years before that genre existed. Yet the film's chaos went far beyond the screen. The cast endured unbearable conditions. Rotting animal bones, real carcasses, and 100-degree heat made the set itself a kind of purgatory. When home video arrived, distributors saw dollar signs, but also danger. The original cut was deemed too disturbing for general audiences. VHS editions were recut across different countries. Some removed the dinner table scene, others shortened the chase sequences, or toned down Leatherface's entrance. Each version was an attempt to control the uncontrollable to package terror for the living room. Still, audiences craved the full nightmare. Bootleg tapes circulated among horror collectors marked uncut in fading ink. Over time, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre became more than a movie. It became a rite of passage, a warning of what independent filmmaking could unleash when no one was watching. Today it is enshrined in the Library of Congress and taught in film schools as the blueprint for modern horror. Yet its true legacy lies in its grit, a film that terrified the world so deeply that even its VHS copies couldn't contain it. Number 2. Cannibal Holocaust, 1979. In the closing days of the decade, Italian director Ruggero Deodato created a film that redefined shock itself. Cannibal Holocaust was born from the chaos of the exploitation era, but it aimed higher and darker than anything before. Structured as a documentary within a movie, it followed a rescue team retrieving footage of a vanished film crew deep in the Amazon jungle. What they found was horror captured on grainy reels so convincing that many believed it was real. When the film premiered in Italy, it ignited a firestorm. Authorities seized the reels, Deodato was arrested and charged with making a snuff film. To prove his innocence, he had to produce his actors alive in court. Even after being cleared, the controversy only deepened. Banned in over 50 countries, it became the most infamous title of the decade, a cautionary tale about the blurred line between realism and exploitation. When home video entered the scene, Cannibal Holocaust faced perhaps the most aggressive censorship in cinematic history. Each country released its own mutilated version, cutting or rearranging scenes, sometimes removing over 20 minutes of footage. Some tapes even added fake narration to justify the violence. But curiosity triumphed. The uncut version became one of the most sought-after bootlegs of all time, traded in secret by horror collectors as a forbidden artifact. Decades later, critics began to see its disturbing intelligence. Beneath its savagery lay a mirror held up to Western media's hypocrisy, the exploitation of suffering for spectacle. Modern restorations now display both its ugliness and its intent, forcing viewers to confront their own voyeurism. Cannibal Holocaust remains the most controversial film ever pressed onto VHS, a relic of a time when movies didn't just shock audiences, they put humanity itself on trial. Number 1. Rolling Thunder, 1977. Rolling Thunder was not the loudest film of the decade, but it was one of the most dangerous. Written by Paul Schrader, who had just penned Taxi Driver, it told the story of Major Charles Rainey, a Vietnam veteran returning home to indifference and decay. When his family is slaughtered by robbers, he turns into a quiet force of vengeance, seeking justice through firepower and fury. What made it haunting was its silence, the way pain simmered beneath control until it finally exploded. The film's realism realism unnerved studio executives. Its portrayal of post-war trauma was too raw, too unsanitized for mainstream audiences. When it first screened, the violence felt almost spiritual, slow, methodical, and deeply personal. The studio demanded heavy cuts, toning down its bloodier sequences and removing Schrader's darker philosophical moments. But when the film hit, VHS distributors went even further, re-editing the pacing to resemble a generic revenge thriller, stripping away the melancholy that gave it soul. The result was two different movies, the brutal but soulful theatrical version and the hollow home video release. Fans of the uncut print described it as a ghost of the 70s, American dream decayed beyond repair. Critics later rediscovered it, calling it one of the great unsung masterpieces of post-Vietnam cinema. Quentin Tarantino called it one of his all-time favorites, even naming his production company after it. Today, Rolling Thunder stands not as mere exploitation, but as a cry from a wounded generation. Every edit made for VHS dulled its truth, yet could not silence its echo. It endures as the film that proved revenge could be tragedy, that violence could be grief, and that the 70s were never truly over. They just changed format. The 70s never feared controversy. They embraced it, bled through it, and rewrote the rules of cinema. These films proved that even when censored, they refused to die. Their reels were cut, but their legends grew sharper with time. Which of these forbidden titles still haunts your memory? Like, subscribe, and join us in rediscovering the uncut truth of film history.